depending on where you are listening to us in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Count Jason Burns.
And I'm Danny Nucci, and this is the What About podcast. I was trying to figure out, it definitely could sound Romanian, which is how I always think. I always think of Dracula as Romanian, because I don't even know where Transylvania is.
I don't know where Transylvania in the U.S. is. There's like a little Transylvania, Pennsylvania, isn't there?
But that's not the typical Transylvania.
You don't know if Dracula lives there or not.
No, I know. I know things. I know things about Dracula.
Well, you know who knows things? Lisa Morton, the author of The History of Halloween, which we thought who better to have on the show to discuss Halloween.
Which is great. I'm glad she indulged us, because obviously she's written books on Halloween and the history of Halloween, but I really appreciate her indulging us and giving us, sort of a little teaser of what the history of Halloween is, because I didn't know. I spoke to her a little about this, but I just thought it was so interesting that she wrote books about haunted houses. She wrote books about paranormal activity. She wrote books, fiction novels, horror fiction novels. She's a huge fiction, like horror fiction fan. And now she's got this book about zombies. So, she has run the gamut from fiction to nonfiction about this,
and carved out a niche for herself, for sure.
Well, but it's one thing to write fiction. It's another thing to actually explore the paranormal and write books on the paranormal and do research, and it's fascinating what she said about it. So, without further ado,
let's do it.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
How are you, Lisa?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Excellent. I wore my Halloween coat in your honor today.
Awesome. Oh, I love it.
I love that he calls it a coat. Oh, it is a coat. It's like a jacket.
It's a whole suit.
I thought it was like a shirt.
Lisa will enjoy this. A couple years ago, I dressed up as Sam Hain for Halloween. And so I had the whole suit, and I had the little, I had a turn-up jack-o'-lantern that I carried around. And so yeah, you're really dialing into my wheelhouse, Lisa. So
awesome.
Well, welcome to Lisa Morton month, as I like to call it, after reading a bunch of stuff. I mean, it really is like, you must know that once the calendar turns to October, your schedule is going to be quite full.
It starts before October.
Oh, it does? Okay. Yeah. Leading up to? Fair enough.
Yeah, it starts in June now.
Wow. Well, and that just seems to be the ever-growing popularity of Halloween. As I grew up in the 80s, and we had the masks that were highly flammable and the razors and the candy and all that stuff. But nowadays it's just like kids, adults, everybody is enjoying the season.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, and it just speaks to your what I can only imagine have been developed passions, because reading about you, which, for people that don't know, I mean, you've had quite a journey. You started as a writer, right? And a movie buff, and then a screenwriter. And then you became a writer of paranormal things. And you had this ghost book. I forget what it's called, or the one about the Victorian spiritualists. So it's just like, it's something that I can see as I look at your website and I look at what has developed over time. Did you know that you were going to have such a vast array of understanding about what some people would call Halloween subjects?
Not a clue.
What if you knew that that's what you would have to do by this age? This is what you have to be informed about.
I would have been very happy about that. It's worked out just fine. But I mean, 20 years ago, I probably thought I was going to be a screenwriter or a novelist or something. So, weird direction.
And now you're both, as well as other things.
Well, and as a screenwriter, you always worry about being typecasted. As a writer in the book market, do you feel like you've been typecasted into the type of things that you're writing, or is it just like a genuine joy of what you're writing about?
It really is the stuff I love. So it's just fine with me.
Well, what's fascinating as I was reading is that you went from someone who was passionate about telling fictional stories about these subjects to someone that was writing nonfiction about paranormal activity. Oh, I have one question right off the top of the bat, because I was talking to my wife about you, and she goes, "Okay, you have to ask her about spirit orbs," because my wife's a photographer, and so she sees a lot of spirit. She goes, "It's not a flare. I can tell you, it's not a flare. Tell her I want to hear what she has to say about spirit orbs."
I mean, the skeptical response is certainly that it's dust on the lens and it's a weird optical phenomenon. And but there are some I have seen photos of that you look at and you go, that doesn't look like dust. It's certainly possible that there could be some sort of energy that is presenting as a glowing orb. I mean, I can believe that as much as I can believe that the spirits of the dead are returning in any form.
Have there been, and now we're just jumping on the orb train here, but now I'm intrigued by this and I have to keep going. Have there been more or less reports of orbs in the digital age?
That's a really good question, and it seems to me like there may have been about the same amount because a lens works the same way in either a film camera or a digital camera, pretty much. In either case, I think I have seen just as many orb photos digital as on old-fashioned, film cameras.
And so here's what I found interesting. I mean, first of all, I found a lot of things interesting about you, Lisa, but one of them is that here you are, someone that became really passionate about, the paranormal, the occult, horror, right? And then ended up exploring these real life phenomena, and yet you remain a skeptic. Because it would be much more advantageous for you to not be skeptical. It'd be much more advantageous to have everything that you ever feared or were passionate about to have turned into facts based on your experience.
That is true. And I do think of myself as a very open-minded skeptic. The real definition of skeptic to me is not somebody who is cynical or just dismisses everything, but someone who says, I don't know. And that's my response to a lot of this stuff. I don't know. I have too many friends who are mediums. I have talked to too many people who have seen or encountered things they couldn't explain. I don't believe they all just hallucinated or that they just saw dust motes on their lens or whatever. They experienced something very real. I don't know what that is. I am not convinced yet, as I mentioned earlier, that the spirits of the dead are coming back. But maybe they are. We just don't know.
Even after Ghosts of the Haunted, what is it? The Ghosts of the Haunted. What is your book? I'm sorry, I forget the title.
Calling the Spirits a History of Seances.
That one. Even then, after all of that.
Well, what was funny about that book was when I started writing it, I had no idea how much of it was going to end up being about fraud.
But that's the whole Harry Houdini story too, right? He spent much of the end of his life trying to defraud mediums.
Yeah, he sure did, and very successfully so. He really wanted to find a real medium because he was looking for his mother. He was very devoted to his mother. He called her my sainted mother, and he would love to have found a real medium who could connect him to mom, and he never found it. And then, of course, he tried to come back himself. He set up a password with his wife that he said he would use if he could come back. It never
And she
happened.
tried for many years, correct?
She sure did. And in fact, they still hold the family still holds a seance every year trying to contact Houdini, and it hasn't happened yet.
That's not true.
It is. Yeah, you actually can join it online every year. You can buy a ticket and join it online. Yeah.
Well, part of the fun of all this stuff for me, Lisa, is the not knowing. Do you think if we did know, like if definitive proof came out that ghosts were real or this was that it would kind of change the dynamic of how we view this stuff?
It certainly would, obviously, but I suspect if anything, it would have more people out there ghost hunting. It's something that has already been growing in popularity for the last 20 years. And I mean, if it was true, I can only imagine everybody would be out there going, hey, I want to see one too.
But being at the forefront of this, and especially having written a book about spiritualists in the Victorian age, you've gotten to see it split into, I guess, what is more like, I think I heard you talk about it, where it was on one end you have mediums, which are, I think, highly popular, very much in the zeitgeist, and then scientific paranormal research. And you've watched this split. What can you tell me about the split when it happened and what your experience with it is?
Yeah, the Victorian spiritualist who started in 1848. We have a very specific date for them because it was two teenage girls in Rochester, New
September of
York. Yeah,
1848.
pretty much. The Fox sisters, who were the first ones to try communicating with a large group of people to contact spirits, that really it was not a thing before
which
then.
isn't that long ago, really, if you think about it.
It's not, yeah. Um, so when we get the seances becoming hugely popular in both the US and the UK, and it's about the 1850s, 60s, 1870s, all of these mediums are coming along, but the spiritualists also believe that they actually call themselves the first religion that can be proven scientifically. And what was amusing about this was that no matter how often it was disproven scientifically, it didn't bother them. They still clung to that belief pretty much through about the turn of the century. And it is no longer a part of spiritualist belief, by the way. There is still a spiritualist church, which is in both the US and the UK. They do not have that as part of their credo at this point. But that weird obsession with science, that they could prove that this was all happening, eventually splits off. And we do get the one side, which is now our television shows, our ghost hunters, our phone apps, and then we get the mediums and the psychics on the other hand. So to me, that happened really probably about 1900.
Mm.
And you're are you skeptic? I mean, the reason I ask is because I'm so interested in your opinion. Do you find any of the mediums that you have come across, are you less skeptical about? Because my mother is absolutely convinced that they're true. Oh no, you have to watch this one. You have to watch this one. He is amazing. He says things you should see. So I'm just curious if that's your experience. Are any of them more particularly believable from your experience?
In terms of the sort of superstar guys, I'm truthfully not incredibly convinced by any of them, but I have friends who are mediums who I think, are gifted in some sense or other. I have seen them say and do things that I couldn't explain. How could they have known that about this place or about this person?
My whole take on that, Lisa and Danny, is that if somebody had that gift, if you were driving down the street and somebody was in an accident, you would get out to help them without asking for money. So at what point does it become sharing your gift with the world and or padding your bank account?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can say that as a writer, I like to be paid.
Sure.
So I certainly understand wanting to get paid. I can understand if you have a particular talent, you put it to use. Sure, you want to be paid, but you should also, as you're saying, use it to help people.
Mhm.
And the people that I know who are working mediums follow that route, and they're really delightful people.
I heard a fascinating interview with a gentleman, and I can't remember his name right now, but your conversation just popped it back into my head. Was somebody who spoke with dead pets. And I thought, well, that is so interesting. And I'm a
Niche.
pet person.
It's a niche
Yes.
market.
But to hear the people he was, and I think he was one of these that I'm referring to, who wasn't asking for money. He was just helping people that wrote him letters, and it would take him months to get back. But to hear the people who he interacted with, sometimes I wonder, even if it wasn't real, if it gives these people peace, is that okay?
Yeah, that's a central question, I think, for a lot of us, and it's one of the things that I dislike about a lot of skeptics, which is that they will go in and say any form of mediumship that's charging money is terrible and fraudulent and shouldn't be allowed. And no, I do believe that there is something to be said for giving people comfort and solace. And one of the things I always point to was a very famous trial in 1944 of a medium named Helen Duncan over in Great Britain. And as part of her defense, her lawyers produced dozens and dozens and dozens of people who got up there and said, I found such comfort through her seances. That defense, by the way, didn't work. She was still found guilty and sentenced to the maximum sentence at the time. But it was certainly something that, I mean, the fact that they found so many people who said, I found great comfort in her words, is something that you can't just dismiss.
Right. And for some people, that may be the worth the price of whatever admission is required. Because if they can sleep better at night, then so be it. In my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And they would say things like, "Oh, my great aunt came back who collected silver and said the silver wasn't worth anything in the long run, and it was her relationships with people that were worth something." And giving people those little nice messages is certainly has
Mm.
some value
It's
to them.
closure.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. If you don't believe in ghosts, you, Lisa Morton, I don't think I believe in ghosts. So you're basically, I'm putting the responsibility of my belief system in your hands at this moment.
Well, I should say that I don't disbelieve in them either.
Fair enough. Okay, so it comes back to that same place. You won't debunk it, but you won't confirm it.
Right. Yeah, I'm open. I still think it's possible that there's something out there, but and maybe it's not ghost as the way we think of ghost.
Well, Lisa, your new book, The Art of the Zombie Movie, is much different than the things we've been talking about for the first couple of minutes of this podcast. But I did want to talk about this, not only because it's your new book, but because zombies have sort of been in the zeitgeist for a while now. I'm curious, not everyone wakes up one day and decides they're going to write the definitive history of the movie Zombie. Why you? Why now?
I was brought in as a hired gun on this, I have to say. It was not my idea. I was contacted by a company that puts together big, beautiful coffee table art books, and they said, "We're going to do one on zombie movies. Would you like to write it?" And I said, "Yes, I certainly would."
Brilliant casting.
And one of the reasons I wanted to do it was just to see what the experience was like of putting together a huge coffee table art book with over 500
Yeah, it's a beautiful
illustrations.
book too.
It's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Yeah, they did a beautiful job.
It was like a trip down memory lane. I was looking at them. I mean, literally, like one of them was Scooby Doo on Zombie Island, which, by the way, I have seen 1,000 times
It's
because
a
of my
classic.
children.
Yes, same here. Same here.
Is that true? Isn't that funny? The ones that obviously Night of the Living Dead jumps out. Some of the '80s ones that the Roger Corman ones like Reanimator, and those that had jumped out at me. But yeah, it was funny to see Scooby Doo on Zombie Island, which, by the way, classic.
Classic. But how many hours of zombie film did you have to watch, Lisa, to write the book? Was this just like a period of like super vegging out in front of the TV and trying to absorb as much as you could?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had certainly seen many of them already, but there were nights when I would just like go over Shudder or Netflix or something and just look and see if there was something I hadn't seen. And I there was one huge classic which I somehow had never seen, which was I Walked with a Zombie from 1943. I don't know how I grew up never seeing that. It was brilliant. It's now one of my favorite zombie movies.
I
Absolutely
was going to ask you
gorgeous.
about that. What were you able to discover that you really loved? I guess that's the one.
It's a movie from 1943 that was made by the producer Val Lewton. All of his movies were great. I had seen all the others. I don't know why I hadn't seen that one. Beautifully shot and very moody and very creepy. It's about a young nurse who gets called to a Caribbean island to take care of this doctor's zombified wife. And she gets pulled into the rituals of the local people. And it's really interesting because it's also not one of those zombie movies that they made a lot of at the time where there's like a sort of colonialist thing that's really icky. This one addresses it head on and talks about the terrible things that were done to the local people. So it's smart, it's relevant. It was really good. And then the other one that was one I stumbled on completely by mistake, just channel surfing one night, that I loved was a Japanese one from just a couple of years ago called One Cut of the Dead. I highly recommend that one to everyone now. It is so fun and so clever, and it's a movie for people who may not even think they like zombie movies.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like you're saying, sort of stumbling on them. Sometimes you don't even know unless it has dead in the title, you don't even know anymore because there's just so much out there.
Yeah.
But there's also so many different kind of cinematic zombies now. Like, the leg draggers, the sprinters. Like in watching all these films for the book, did you end up liking one particular type of zombie more than others?
I will always be a slow zombie person.
Mhm.
One of yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, very young, I saw Dawn of the Dead in a theater. I had never seen anything like that. It just kind of destroyed me for about a
Me
week.
too, Lisa. And I
Yeah.
lived in front of a cemetery. So what I did for about a year to convince myself that I would be okay is it was an apartment building. We lived on the second floor. I would say, well, this was like an old cemetery, 1800 cemetery. Well, they didn't have any muscle left, so they couldn't get up the stairs to get me. So people on the first floor, they were done, but we would be okay.
Nice. That's a good
Yeah, yeah.
justification, yeah.
That's how I slept at night.
I was gonna say anything to let you sleep at night.
But I think there's something scarier about the slow ones. I mean, maybe that doesn't even make sense in a weird way, but the idea that they are just these things that have no personality, no intelligence, they can barely move. But when they mass together as a horde, I think it's that idea of that slow horde descending on you that's really frightening.
With the idea that it's sort of forever changing, and I know there's a lot of sort of dissection of the zombie genre these days about what it means about where we are as a society. Did you discover anything about that, Lisa, in terms of what are these movies saying now as they're sort of everywhere? TV, film, whatever you need, there's some zombie related something somewhere.
Yeah, I think I mean, they obviously can vary a little bit in terms of their meaning, but I think the overall meaning is a fear of conformity. That fear that we're gonna fall into just this mass and, if we're alive, we're gonna be nothing but a walking meat locker. If we die, we're just gonna be this shambling thing that has no memories, no intelligence. And it's interesting that the zombies really took off in like the 70s, about the same time that we were going through a lot of massive cultural shifts. We were getting away from the sort of conformity that was the status quo in the 50s. And there's even a quote that I include in the book from John F. Kennedy about how conformity is this terrible thing. And what does he say? Something like the enemy of individuality or something like that. And so I think they came about at a time when we were really trying to find ourselves and value our own individuality, and they just reflect that fear that we are just gonna be part of this big faceless mass.
What about Halloween?
The brief history is that it probably derives from an ancient Celtic holiday called Samhain. Samhain was a New Year's festival for the Celts, and these were the Irish Celts. And so it was a time when the days were getting very short. They were hunkering down for a long, really hard winter. They were bringing their livestock in from the fields and so forth. And because it was this time when one year went to another, they thought it was a time when barriers were kind of very thin. And so when they celebrated Samhain, it was a night when the other world, these terrible things that lived in this other world could cross over into our world and wreak all kinds of mischief and havoc and do terrible things. And I think that is where Halloween gets its macabre side from, because the Christian holiday that comes along, All Saints' Day, is not especially scary. There's not a lot of scary stuff about most of the saints. And the Catholic Church moved their celebration of saints from the original date of May 13th to November 1st, probably to try and co-opt Samhain, because they had found they were way more successful co-opting these existing pagan celebrations than trying to stamp them out.
And so when you say co-op, Lisa, you're melding them into what they could control.
Yeah, what they could control, what they could kind of subsume and take in. And so this combination of the Catholic Church religious observance with this ancient pagan sort of ghost spooky year-end festival eventually gives us the modern Halloween. And obviously it goes through a lot of transitions before it gets to where we are now. For a long time, it was a night celebrated mainly by the Scottish and Irish people in the British Isles. They celebrated it with playing games, little fortune telling games that they would use to try and see into the future. And it was a party night for them. And then when they come to America in 1840 to escape famine, they bring it with them. It spreads throughout America. Trick or treat comes in the mid 20th century. And trick or treat is not old. People tend to think must go back thousands of years or something. It's not. It was instituted in the 1930s as a way to buy off kids who were getting really destructive with their prank playing on Halloween.
Distraction.
And yeah,
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
fantastic. Is that true? Is that where it came
Yeah.
from? That's great. Have some candy. Stop it. Have some candy.
In fact, this is an interesting little item. This is something that cities were doing all over the country.
It says Halloween Fun Book for those that are
Yeah.
listening.
Minneapolis. This one's from
Huh.
Minneapolis. And they would send these to homeowners. And it's a party guide. And it says, here's what you can do with these kids to keep them from egging your house or pushing over your.
What year is that book? What year is that
This
book?
one, I
What's the
think,
publisher
is
date?
30. This is 37.
Oh, wow.
So why were the kids getting together on that particular night to create mischief? Like what caused them to choose October 31st?
It was all part of what had come over with the Irish, especially. The Irish love to play pranks on Halloween night. And one of the things that they loved to do, for example, was they would take a big turnip because they didn't have pumpkins in Ireland,
Right.
and they would carve a spooky face into it. And the spooky face was supposed to be a legendary trickster character called Jack, which is where we get Jack-o'-lantern from. And they would,
Jack of the Lantern was his name, right?
yeah,
Correct?
exactly.
Who was originally a turnip. Bet nobody knows that. I do now.
Right.
Fun fact
Yeah.
about Halloween. Did you know that originally the pumpkin was a turnip?
Not as easy to carve a turnip either.
No, I can only imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've never tried. I'm sure it must be very hard, but so they would carve these spooky faces, put a candle inside, set that thing out by the side of a dark road on Halloween night just to have fun, scare somebody, play the prank, and then that comes with them when they come to America. Except by the time we get to like 1910, 1920, all of these American boys are doing these pranks and some American girls. But the pranks get more destructive. It starts off with just the innocent stuff, but then the kids are moving into the cities as America is becoming more urbanized. And now they're setting fires and destroying windows and tripping people on sidewalks. And that's why cities start saying, we've got to do something. We'll either ban the holiday or we'll tell homeowners how they can buy these kids off.
That's awesome.
So if we took a family from the 1930s and brought them here today, they would not be able to recognize our Halloween.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't. The kids would probably love it, but otherwise, yeah, they might recognize parts of it. I mean, some of the stuff in the 30s, like people were trying to set up primitive little haunted trails in their basements to scare the kids. So they might look at that and go, "Oh, that's a little bit like the haunted attractions now."
Lisa, you're kind of blowing my mind. So again, I grew up in the 80s. The Charlie Brown Halloween special was like so important to me. So is that kind of like propaganda? That was like to get us to celebrate Halloween the way they wanted us to celebrate Halloween?
Well, the It's a Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown is that's kind of an outlier in all kinds of ways for Halloween. It aired, I think, first in 68. It actually started a huge cottage industry in children's books for Halloween. There weren't that many before that. But there were a lot of people who didn't actually at the time didn't love that special. And one of those people was Ray Bradbury, the author, who turned around and wrote his own version of Halloween history for kids called The Halloween Tree. So yeah, that's Charlie Brown was its own little thing.
Well, not obviously, but to me, the origin of the costumes is the macabre costume, ghosts, goblins, so on. But did you have a sense of when the costume thing became a prevalent part of the holiday?
It wasn't until the 20th century. It was something that they started with at parties just for dress up kind of things. They might, for example, hand the kids a sheet, and that was the extent of the costuming, and or pull some old clothes out of the attic. Oh, you're a pirate now because you're wearing grandma's bandana on your head. So it isn't really until after World War II that costuming becomes huge, because trick or treat kind of went on hold during the war. A lot of things did. And it comes back huge afterwards. And one of the things is the costume companies now are coming in and going, hey, you know what? You don't want to be a thief or a hobo again when we're making you a Superman costume.
Yeah, so the prevalence of those licensed characters sort of helped the costume industry move forward.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And then at the same time, the candy companies are coming in too and going, hey, listen, Mom, you don't want to spend all day making these popcorn balls, and the kids would rather have chocolate anyways.
Unless you're Charlie Brown, you get The Rock, which was terrible.
Right.
So one of the things we do is we have an audience question, and this one comes from Julia A. And she wants to know, what is your favorite way to spend Halloween night as an adult? I mean, that's got to be some stress, isn't it, Lisa? How am I going to spend Halloween? I'm sure you get this question a lot.
I do, and weirdly enough, I'm not big into costuming, but I love to do my own front yard as a little tiny, like, yard haunt. And it's very family friendly, and we have fun. In fact, we just started yesterday setting it up already. So we do lots of, we turn our driveway into a graveyard, and every year the same families come by and make their kids pose with the gravestones, and it's really fun.
Do you follow the guidelines of that Minneapolis book from the 1930s?
We're a little past that.
Yeah.
So you have Halloween traditions. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about the holidays, the traditional things. I mean, my kids are, grown, but boy, was that fun. Just, seeing all the kids in the neighborhood. I mean, I live in Southern California, so, it's usually warm enough that everybody's out. We're not braving the elements usually on Halloween. Most of the time, I'm actually trying to watch the World Series because it's at the same time. Sometimes it falls on Halloween, and I'm walking around with a cell phone, but that's another story.
Well, and I live in a contained neighborhood in New England, right? So we have all the fall flavor here, but also it's become like this socialization thing where we all get together, the neighbors, and it's this big block party, and it becomes this big event, which as a kid growing up in the 80s, we didn't have any of that. It just seems like Halloween is growing and growing, and certainly the spirit Halloween stores that slip into any sort of corpse body of a of a big department store are helping. But as you've sort of told the history of Halloween over the course of the years, do you find yourself having to update it more and more as the holiday sort of keeps moving forward, bigger and bigger?
Yeah, it's definitely a holiday that seems to sort of transform around. I think it's about every 40 or 50 years. And the last time it really changed was kind of in the 80s, when we started to get the big haunted attractions, and the holiday moved away from being only for kids and became something adults were participating in more. And so it seems like we may be about due for it to kind of shift its identity again. And I suspect part of that is going to be the way it transforms as it catches popularity around the globe. Because it really has spread just in the last 15 years. It has become gigantically popular in places that never heard of it 20 years ago. And it's incredible to watch, and it's really interesting to see how some of these places take it and put their own local stuff on it. Like Hong Kong has a very popular amusement park that started doing Halloween mazes probably 20 years ago. They now do like a Buddhist hell maze at Halloween.
A Buddhist, I just want to make sure I heard that. A Buddhist hell maze, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And I just
Please Please tell me what that is,
Well,
please.
the Buddhist belief, there are these different levels of hell, and so they did a haunted attraction that captured a lot of that, and had traditional Buddhist devils and demons and things in it. And I suspect we're going to see more of that as Halloween moves around the globe, with local cultures kind of taking it in and adding their own stuff and spitting it back out. And
Much like the Irish brought their mischievous pranks to the US.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just she's something else, isn't she? You know what it is? I just feel so comfortable talking to her about this subject because she's so informed.
I really enjoyed how, regardless of what we asked, she didn't have to go back to the well to figure it out. She knew it right off the top of her head.
She had facts. I mean, you can tell this is she is really an expert because she did not hesitate. She was right on top of it, and she's like, "Yeah, no problem. I got this one." Every single question she had an answer to. I was hoping we would stump her or ask her something original, but apparently we didn't. We suck.
Well, and you have adult children now, so you're not going out trick or treating. But I still have young kids. We're going out trick or treating, and I can tell you that I would assume 100% of the people I'm going to see out on Halloween don't know why we're going out on Halloween.
Oh, you're gonna have fun facts, buddy.
Yes,
You're
yes.
gonna be like, by the way, would you like to know the origin of this pumpkin?
Can I give you this piece of candy to not egg my house?
Did you know, hey kids, did you know that the reason you get candy?
Basically, we learned that we have Halloween in its current form because teenage boys are a-holes.
Yes, basically, that's basically it. Yeah.
All right. Well,
As Halloween moved into the cities, the hooligans took over, and so the candy industry was, grew as a result of that.
well, sir, I hope that as we head into November, we can have some interesting subjects for future holidays. I don't know. I saw a really good book on acorns. I'm really serious about this. Maybe we could do a little book on acorns.
Acorn expert John Squirrels is a acorn expert.
He is nutty.
Oh no! You know what? I think this is where I say to the listener, "Thanks for listening."
Music by Denny Nucci. Produced and edited by the same two people you heard hosting this show because they have no friends.